Topics for today. 2.5 years of the war. Criminal and aggressive for Russia and existential and righteous for Ukraine. Next is update on Kursk. And finally, Ukraine in India and Narendra Modi in Kiev. What does it mean for both countries? These topics in more detail by UATV English and me, Henry Keane, bringing the hard truth in easy terms for the whole free world, directly from Ukraine as usual. What does it mean? War. A war for some. The war for Ukrainians. Because it's personal. Personal life, personal death during these 2.5 years. No one will ever understand what it is like when an enemy comes to your door and murders half of your family, rapes your wife, and abducts your child until it is your door, your family, and your child. No matter what I say, no matter what I do or show you, you might become afraid eventually and empathic, I hope, but it will be next to impossible for me to make you actually understand what does it mean, what it is like. But what you can understand about this war is that for 2.5 years we Ukrainians have been fighting off ill Soviet ambitions of Russia, solely because we have no choice. This war is existential, and this 2.5 years changed us. It changed our attitude towards many things, and Independence Day, for example, just as well. The attitude changed radically. In 2013, this holiday was the most important for only 12% of Ukrainians, and then for 64% in 2024. It happened because of the war. Our personal tragedies transformed into national understanding. Not any peace is acceptable, but only just and long-lasting one. And you, wherever you live, would understand this exactly the way we did if Russian hordes would have invaded your homeland. So in 2.5 years of that war, we can say the same thing as we've been saying in the first 2.5 weeks of it. Stand with us. Help Ukraine. Protect human rights. Because 2.5 years ago, a time has come to prove these are your personal rights just as well, and nothing is decided yet.
Russia has not yet lost, and Ukraine has not yet won. We know very well that the road to this victory is still a long one and will involve great efforts and sacrifice. But there is no other way. Any attempts to get along with Russia behind Ukraine's back are short-sighted and will lead to an even greater tragedy in the future. There is no going back to the situation from before the 24th of February. There is no return to business as usual with Russia.
Indeed, because hundreds of our children were murdered by Russians. Yes, I say Russians as a nation, as it is exactly their Russian national indifference caused Putin. Just as bacteria and viruses cause disease, Vladimir Putin is a consequence. It were Russians themselves. Putin didn't came from Mars, Russians did to him what they did to Joseph Stalin and other bloodthirsty monsters of their horrific national history of terror. They glorified all of them, turning a great Russian culture into a cult of Russian greatness. And Ukraine is not going to tolerate this cult because, just as in that song, remember, if you tolerate this, then your children will be next. No way. Why they're doing it? A great, awful Russian juggernauts will come for revenge. Ukrainians want war, not peace, otherwise they should have been talking to Russia, and so on and so bad. I have heard and read and watched literally hundreds of these sitting on their sofas, people wondering why would a small Ukrainian army ever dare to tease a great Russian bear? Well, here are some whys and explanations and update on Kursk. First and foremost, Ukraine's surprise invasion of Russian Kursk Oblast brings peace closer. Peace that Ukraine deserves, long-lasting and just. Kursk operation completely derailed Russia's plans to dictate a peace deal on its terms and strengthen Ukraine's hand in any future negotiations, and simple as that. Russia had previously expected to impose its peace terms on Ukraine, that is, large land concessions, no state sovereignty, no freedom of choice, no NATO, no nothing that Russian Tsar considers dangerous for his corrupted, usurped power, and that is a large number of all sorts of things, trust me on that. The Kursk operation, where in 2 weeks our army captured Russian turf, comparable in size to what Russia's army had taken in the Donbass over a costly 10-month offensive, has sparked frustration in Russia. The Kremlin just has to acknowledge it now. It is the first invasion of Russian territory by a foreign military power since World War II, and the fact that the Kremlin inflicted that onto itself is also undeniable, and so it has dealt a blow to potential peace talks on the Kremlin's terms. This is a Ukrainian part of the US election dance also. Yes, you heard me right, as the leverage Kyiv gains now could be critical in the future, especially if Donald Trump is once again elected president in the November 5th US presidential election and pushes his delusional, sorry for that, controversial peace negotiations between Ukraine and Russia. Also, if Kamala Harris is elected, then she should make her explicit goal to turn today's horrendous war of attrition into Ukrainian victory. Says not me, but Anders Aslund, a professor of Georgetown University, in an interview to Kiev Independent. So here it is for you in easy terms. Kursk is a currency of peace, if you will. And nothing is over yet, as Mr. Aslund wisely added that Ukraine's surprising offensive in Russia's Kursk Oblast may be the beginning of a more promising development. In case you haven't heard already, India's Modi arrives in Ukraine for talks with President Zelensky weeks after Putin meeting. India acted and acts as an economic lifeline, no less, for Russia, ramping up purchases of its crude oil after countries around the world slapped economic sanctions on Moscow, isolating it economically. Also, India overtook China as the world's biggest importer of Russian oil last month. Well, some might say India's purchasing of oil from Russia are not indicative in any way and are of a wider political posture. And this someone are, who could have thought, Subramanian Jaishankar, a Minister of External Affairs of India. India is a big oil consumer. It is a big oil importer because we do not have oil, he says. It is not like there is a political strategy to buy oil. There is an oil strategy to buy oil. There is a market strategy to buy oil, says Mr. Jaishankar. Sure, but why to come to Moscow for that in person? Modi's visit, the first by an Indian leader since Ukrainian independence, comes just weeks after he traveled to Moscow in a symbolic first overseas trip of his new term as a leader, where he held talks with Russian dictator Vladimir Putin that were criticized by Kiev. Of course, after talks concluded, India's Minister of External Affairs, Mr. Jaishankar, stressed that India is committed to helping end the war. We are very, very keen that this conflict should come to an end, Jaishankar said at a press briefing. But how do you do that very thing, Mr. Modi and Mr. Jaishankar? Despite repeatedly calling for a ceasefire and peace in Ukraine, New Delhi has refrained actually from calling a spade and condemning Russia's invasion for obvious reason. Of course, New Delhi seeks maintaining relations with Moscow, a major supplier of its arms. Mr. Modi once said that it is impossible to settle the conflict on the battlefield. Then what are these arms for, I wonder?
So this is now at an inflection point where India actually has to decide which side of the world they are actually in. Are they a truly Western ally, or are they an ally of Vladimir Putin? So Modi's visit to Moscow was not well received across the world, particularly by the liberal world, the Western world. So I think this is a visit where Modi is trying to make amendments to that, like make some amendments so that the Western world does not reject him as a world leader. I think that's what he's trying to do by being in Kyiv.
Well, this way or another, Ukraine throughout the war has sought to convince countries that maintain close relationship with Russia, such as India and China, to push Putin towards Kyiv's terms of peace. And of course, Zelensky hailed Modi's visit as historic and symbolic, that's what it is, and thanked India for its support of sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine over 2.5 years of war.
We have agreed on 4 documents between Ukraine and India during the historic visit of Prime Minister Modi. These are the medical sphere, this is cooperation in the agricultural sector, humanitarian relations, this is culture, and joint statements has been prepared on building a strategic partnership between our countries, trade between our countries and military technical cooperation. All this should be strengthened.
Your Excellency, despite the difficult circumstances, our bilateral relations are seeing good progress, and I can say that in such a tense environment, progress in our bilateral relations between India and Ukraine reflects the maturity of our bilateral relations.
And one more thing on the topic. Is there truth on a battlefield or not? That I don't know. But what I know for sure is that Ukraine never wanted to turn itself into a battlefield. We never invaded Russia. We never annexed Russia's land. It is Putin and Russia who are to blame that battlefield is the place where we in Ukraine are forced to be looking for truth these days. And what we surely have found out so far is our freedom on that battlefield. And that was and is worth fighting for sure. Well, it looks like that was it for tonight and for the week. Thanks so much for being with us. Please like, share and comment. Your voice indeed matters, as it in turn helps Ukrainian voice to be heard worldwide. More to come already next week with my beautiful colleagues on UATV English, bringing you hard truth in easy terms, as usual, directly from Ukraine. Stay tuned for more and goodbye.